Hi guys, I hope you're all doing well and welcome back to a very special episode on the Just Music podcast. This week, I had the blessed opportunity to sit down with Mr. George Rousseau. Mr. Rousseau is actually a former band director and with tons of musical experience. He's a multi-instrumentalist, and when I say multi-instrumentalist, there hasn't been an instrument that I haven't seen him play. So this is a really, really cool episode. And up until this point, I have had all kinds of people on the program. I've had opera singers and composers and instrumentalists and even people who work and own music shops like Elderly Instruments. So this is a really, really cool episode, and I gained a lot of new perspectives sitting down with Mr. Rousseau. Mr. Rousseau now joins in progress. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Just Music podcast. I'm really excited about this episode because we have a very, very talented band director. I've had all kinds of different individuals on the podcast up until this point, but I have never had a band director. So I'm very excited about that, and I would like to welcome onto the program Mr. George Rousseau. Welcome.
Thank you, Justin. It's great to be here.
So what's really interesting is Mr. Rousseau and I actually have a mutual relationship with one another because his daughter actually went to the same or goes to the same college in which I went to. And so we had that, we first actually met because of getting involved in the music program. His daughter is heavily involved in Olivet's music program. So we became friends through that, and then we got introduced in that manner. So it's super cool how you get to meet all these people in these different places that you get involved in and you cross paths with. So before we, kind of get into all the questions, I would like you to give a little brief introduction about yourself, maybe where you grew up and how your first encounter came to be with music and, just a little background information about yourself.
Well, I'm a recently retired band director. I retired at the end of last year after 30 years of teaching, 26 years in the Belding School District. While there, I did team taught the high school program for most of that time, but I was mostly in charge of the middle school band program. Totally loved it to the highest extent. I like being with the young people. It keeps you young when you work with young people. And and then I retired, and while I was at Belding Middle School, probably about 18 years ago, they told me I would have to do choir because that's kind of what happens sometimes. And so I could play piano pretty good, but I saw, and I needed to get credits. Part of keeping your certificate is every 5 years you need to have 6 credits, graduate school credits. And so I took a class called Guitar for the Non-Guitarist at Vandercook College of Music, presented by Michael J. Miles from the Old Town School of Folk Music in Chicago. And I just hit it off with Mr. Miles, and he said, in Chicago public schools, they have a class just like choir or band, only it's guitar. So I had my principal at the time. I was coming back in the summer. He said, how was your class in Chicago? I said, in Chicago public schools. And he said, that sounds great. How much do you think it would cost? And that took me by surprise. I said, $2,000. Oh, great. Let's do it. Wow. Then. So I set up a guitar program while at Belding Middle School. And it was originally just for 8th grade. It was recognized. I presented at the Michigan Music Conference 6 times because of the popularity. And it's a class that's different. It's not a lot of guitar classes. You have the classical guitar, much like your recital, but this was more of let's strum around like happy idiots. Let's give you another outlet for your musical abilities, and maybe even have a skill that you might use someday in later in life. So that has gone very well also. So and then of course with being retired, I went to get some training in addictions and recovery because I find that I cannot live without interacting with young people. It's just, I missed it terribly. The Christmas concert, my first Christmas concert that I didn't direct at the middle school, I went to watch and I was just twitching. It was just like too much. I just couldn't handle it. And so we're starting a pilot program. I'm back at Belding High School. And this pilot program is in addictions and recovery. We use Smart Recovery kind of as our basis. And we meet with students that either volunteer and say, hey, I want help stopping to do this, whether it's vaping or alcohol or cannabis. And then we just kind of work on it. And some of them just want to talk. And that's a great thing, because in education now, it seems like if you can't measure it, it doesn't count. And if everybody out there thinks about, what they liked best, their best subject, a lot of times it was a teacher and how they presented it. So I get to do the best part about teaching is just to listen to kids and maybe offer up some advice from my vast years of 54 years on this planet Earth and see how that goes. So music has always been a part of my life. My dad played bass in a bar band in the UP, and he happened to play, and this is in the 60s, so they were playing She Wore Blue Velvet. And in this little bar in the middle of nowhere was a lady who was wearing a blue dress. And so she said, hey, thanks for singing that song to me. And my dad, he's a bass player, so he knows what to do at this point. He says, yes, I was playing it for you. Yes, yes, yes. And so many moons later, they get married and have me. And so we've always had music.
Wow.
My grandma, if you go to the UP, my grandma Leah, and you turn right and you go until you run out of land, that's where my mom is from. And so my grandma Leah played piano for the church. And I think my first real memory of true happiness was sitting on the piano bench next to Grandma Leah while she played Peter, Peter, Pumpkin Eater, and Mary Had a Little Lamb, and just doing those things.
Sure, yeah.
So I really think that's where I got hooked. And I've always had music going. I like a wide variety of music. I have my lesson studio where we have keyboards, we have a drum set, guitars, bass, trumpets, French horns. So that's what my lessons, I have a lesson studio here. My wife does private piano upstairs with the baby grand. And so it's just around us all the time. So I think that's probably where it came from. That whole, my grandma Leah and music being happiness. And I think that's kind of how I like to teach too.
Sure.
That you should be having a good time playing. I mean, and make other people, and in doing that, you make other people happy too.
Right.
Unless you're playing at 2 a.m. in a dive bar and they're all depressed, and then you got to change it up to some beat. The thrill is gone.
Oh, jeez.
So, do something like that.
That is, I'm getting so excited you just talking about that, because that kind of just evokes that emotion back into me, where it's like when I first kind of got into it, my first experiences and encounters with it. So that's really cool that it's just been so prevalent in your, not only just in your adult life, but obviously like in your upbringing as a child and just being raised around it. And what's so cool about it is, being close friends with McKenna, your daughter, is like, I remember like when she would tell me these stories about how you guys would have like, holiday get together parties, and you guys would just all like sit around and like play music and stuff. And that's just such a cool thing for me to think about, because not that it's a bad thing, but unfortunately I don't come from a musical background. Like none of my family and my immediate family or exterior family for that means doesn't really play much music. So I've never really had that experience. So I've always been kind of like jealous and envious when I hear other families that have that, because I'm like, that's so cool. It's so awesome.
It's a blessing and a curse though too. Yeah. No, we figure out. Yeah. But yeah, we have, like I said, down in the basement, in my studio, I'm learning some tricks now that this is part of my income. But we also have a stage outside. So we have an outdoor stage, and when the kids were just way little, they would put on shows. The cousins would come over, and so they put on shows outside, and we live on a dirt road, but people would lock up their brakes and watch for a couple minutes and then honk their horn and leave. So it's always been a source of fun, and that's when McKenna, my daughter, she didn't get any sort of device till she was, all the other kids have a DS. Why can't I have a DS? But we could hand her a trumpet and she would figure things out. And she'll say, doesn't it sound like Mary Had a Little Lamb? When she was 4, 5, 6 years old. Give her a trombone, so that's why. And if you know how my daughter is if somebody needs help, she'll say, well, I could probably do that. And then hand her the instrument, lock her in a closet. An hour later, she's got it pretty well down. So she's still sleeping. That's college for you.
Wow, but still, I mean that's really cool. So I want to talk. I mean, obviously you taught in a public school sense for several years. So I wanted to talk about your experiences with that, because as a guitar major, or as my main instrument, and when you talk about like developing guitar programs in schools like that, in public schools, it's not a common program as it is for like strings, like an orchestra.
Right.
I mean, especially like with my middle school and my high school here in the Lansing area, we had like strings and concert band, and then we had choir, and then in high school we had our jazz band, which you would have to audition into. And so it's so interesting, because when you talk about developing guitar programs, like at least in the state of Michigan that I'm aware of, that's like really not that common. It's really uncommon.
Right. Well, and Belding is a Class C school.
Mm-hmm.
And the joke used to be, Belding's got culture, but it's all agriculture. We're surrounded by apple orchards and cornfields, and the kids that have to come from Grand Rapids to play sports, they're thinking that they're falling off the end of the earth, getting here. And we didn't think we'd ever get here, but it was one of those necessities that we couldn't add. We have a choir program, but it's choir programs done by generally, instrumental music teachers. Mm-hmm. So it's okay. It's not a great choir program. But we still have people that go in and go to college and are very successful. But the guitar program being so unique was something that just took off. At one point in time, out of 140 students in 8th grade, I was seeing 118 out of 140.
Wow.
And they had to sign up for the class. So they had to bring the high school director down to teach part of 8th grade band, so I could be available to teach another section of guitar. Now, financially, the state isn't in that position anymore.
Right.
So the district isn't in the position anymore. So sometimes you have to ride the wave when you can get it, and to have a classical guitar program, or like I don't even know how to. We just kind of take Hank Williams' Jambalaya, and my theme would always be at Michigan Music Conference: pick guitar, fill fruit jar, and be happy. Because that's really what the program is to give the students another outlet. Sure. To do something different. We also, by the time I ended, had a ukulele class.
Wow.
We had an advanced guitar class that would go to elderly instruments. So you had Lily Werben on there.
Yeah.
So, he is awesome. And Stan has really, we had a local music store that started us off, but when they went out of business, Elderly just picked it up and ran. And Ray Ostshire from Elderly is just like our best friend. If we needed something, he would figure out a way to do it. He gave us our first 2 ukuleles, Elderly's did, to get the ukulele class going. Wow. So I mean, they're just, that's the nice thing. And we would go to Elderly, put on a concert, and they would give the kids a tour and say, okay, not very many guitar players make it, even in guitar class 2 at the middle school. Mm-hmm. So here's some other jobs that you can do and still play the guitar. And so they'd show, if you're good at photography, you can help us out by taking pictures for the web page. If you're good at web design, computers, you could do this. So teachers now are going to have to be flexible. Right. Music teachers are going to have to be flexible. Some great band directors were guitar players, that went to Grand Valley or someplace else, and because it is a chordal instrument, I think as far as they pretty much have a really good ear. I'm originally a percussionist, mm-hmm. So I think it helped me in the long run to teach guitar. So to add to my strength is rhythm. And so when I team teach with the high school director, that's usually been our forte. is that I make sure the rhythms are clean
Mm-hmm.
and accurate, and they make sure that they have third position on the trombone and some of those things. So it's a great profession, because you also get to know kids. I've known kids for 7 years of their life. You know, I get them in 6th grade,
Right.
and then they graduate, and so I know those kids. And
Right.
you know, some teachers say, I really know those kids. I know what they're going to do before they're going to do it sometimes, and that makes them mad. So
Well, and it's also like when you have, I would imagine it's completely different in my respect, because with my students that I have, I'm teaching them like a half an hour lesson a week.
right.
You know, with like people who are working like in an actual public school system, you're literally, you know, in their lives for several years like that. So you really develop a relationship with them, and you get to know them and their personalities, and, you know, what kind of teaching
Right.
style may work for them or what doesn't work for them. And you just really get to know them as an individual, you know, which I would imagine is really, really rewarding.
Well, and you look at guitar class, I'd have them for a 9-week period.
Mm-hmm.
And we would be playing 5 days a week for 45 minutes.
Right.
And so I used to say you'd have to be a special sort of stupid if you can't play guitar after we're done. But then I got a class of kids that will say, oh, don't worry, I can be that special sort of stupid. So I didn't say that anymore, but they got good anyway.
Right.
You know, after the first month, kids are playing guitar 5 days a week for 45 minutes. They get pretty good pretty fast.
Right.
So that was, again, where I had to go get some more practical guitar playing skills, because I was only as good as 9 weeks of a guitar class.
Right.
So I started playing with a lot of different groups too. I played with a group called the Horn of Plenty Band, which is based out of Belding, Greenville, Rockford area.
Okay.
And we were just a jam band. We'd just show up. And so sometimes I wouldn't know what I was playing, so I would bring I have a small drum set, a breakbeats drum set. I brought my bass and amp, and brought my guitar and amp, because I didn't know what I was going to play when I get there. And
Right.
and then, oh yeah, the drummer that said he's going to be here isn't going to be here, so get your kit out. And then the drummer would show up. Well, play guitar for us, and put it back and get out my guitar. So,
Wow.
but that was great, because it taught me how to play and listen. Some of those guys didn't need a lick of music. You could just name the tune, name the key, and boom, they were gone. And that wasn't me. I was just like, I got to find the page for that. And they'd yell back, starts off on a D, it's in a go. And then they go. So kind of a baptism by fire.
Wow. That it's interesting, because like, you know, now you kind of bring that up, is like, I think guitar is like one of those instruments where you don't necessarily have to study it in an academic sense, or you like really have to learn much theory on it, or learn how to read music for that manner, and still have a successful career in it. So like,
right.
It's super interesting. And it's like, what I'm teaching my students is I push learning how to read music, and I push it. And I'm like, you know what, I said this, if you're going to want to learn it, you got to read music, just because I said you're at such a disadvantage if you don't learn how to read. And I really, really strongly encourage that. It's not like they have to, but I really say, you know, you should. And playing with some of these guys in the Lansing area that I'm friends with, like when I tell them that I can read music, or if I pull out a staff paper and I'm reading, they're completely mind blown. They're like, You read music? Like what? Like that it's just so weird that the guitar and reading music, they just don't coincide like it would be if you were a violin player or a trumpet player. Like if you're going to want to play that instrument, you're going to learn to read music. It's inevitable. You know, you can't do it. So it's interesting why guitar is like that type of instrument.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I used to help out at the MASTA, the Michigan String Teachers Association, has a summer camp over in Howell.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would do a guitar unit for them. And a couple of times I did improvisation, which the bass players loved. The cello bass players, you know, I teach them how we would play in the key of G. I teach them about voice leading, what tones to start with, you know, how to get to that next level. The violin and viola players hated it. Some of these kids from great programs, some of the best programs in Lansing and Grand Rapids, Traverse City, those kids hated improv. They can look at the piece of music and play it. Right. And so you're telling them not to do that, but what do you think is the mathematical probability of the next note? And then they'd be, well, this is stupid. You know, why do I got to do this? Well, if you sight read, you know, if you have to sight read, you're going to have a better probability of knowing what the right note is without even looking at it, what the next note is.
Right.
So it met with some resistance, but like I said, as long as I had bass players in there, they were all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
Like, this is the greatest thing. It was only a half-hour little clinic that I did for them, but it's interesting. I do a little bit of both. I play in pit orchestras, and sometimes you just grabbing the next instrument. I think it was I forget which musical it was, but it was like 16 measures of acoustic guitar, and then switch to an electric guitar, and then put that back and grab the banjo, and then go back to acoustic, all in one song. So you kind of have to know some of those skills, and being good at music theory, it really does help with the guitar. Right. I've been able to do more theoretically with the guitar, because in band setting, if you're talking about majors and minors, you got to think of, okay, this saxophone player, now I got to transpose what note they were playing and tell them which one, and so that's, you only have that shorter block. It takes away, so you don't get as great of a chance in music theory in a band or orchestra setting than you do in a guitar setting, which is one instrument that can play major, minor, augmented, diminished with a one finger movement sometimes. So It's kind of cool.
So my follow-up question is this, because this is so cool, because I know you're talking about all these instruments, is for someone who's like listening or aspiring to want to learn music, for somebody like you who's a multi-instrumentalist and I've witnessed you play all these different instruments, and like for me it's like when I watch you do it, it's not like, oh, I just kind of fuddy-duddy around on it. When I say that you play it. So like how did you basically, like, how did you get so good at each instrument? Because that's one thing that I've tried to do, and like I would consider myself pretty decent at guitar and ukulele, but guitar and ukulele are so similar, Right. So I don't really say that I'm a multi-instrumentalist, because if I can sit on a piano and I can play you a major scale, but I can't go to town on it like I could like on a guitar or something. So like how did you did you have to take your practice time and like divide it and say, I'm going to spend 30 minutes on this instrument today, 30, or how did you get so good at all these different instruments?
Well, in college, of course, I went to Olivet College, and they had a music education degree. We had some great people, which pushed me to be as good as them. But in college, I would practice 2 hours a day and 4 hours on weekends. And being a percussionist, that's easy, because you can spend 20 minutes on mallets, go over, do some snare drum rudiments, hit the drum set for 20 minutes, half hour, go over and play the timpani. And then if I was taking woodwind methods or brass methods, then I could spend some time on that. The people I went to school with were phenomenal. And it was a great learning experience. I'll tell you one that we had woodwind methods, and I was playing the oboe, and one of my friends, Demetrius, whose brother is Racy Biggs, a great Detroit trumpet player. Okay. And Demetrius says, that sounds like, this is back in the Kenny G day, he says, that sounds like a soprano sax. So he starts playing some jazz chords. I start playing some flatted seventh scales. And then my woodwind prof walked by, opened the door, said, stop it, and then left. It's just cool. But I mean, there are patterns. Music is very patternistic. Form follows function, or does function follow form? And so whether it's woodwind and you learn your fingerings for a particular scale, and then realizing on the saxophone, if you want to play an octave up, you hit the octave key. And the pattern for fingerings for trumpet, French horn are very similar. For treble clef, baritone, there you go. Trombone makes a lot of sense, because it's all, you have to use your ear, but so it's you learn the patterns, and that's, I think, as a percussionist, percussion is all about pattern. So that's how I look at doing everything. Even on, like you said, on the guitar, the D chord is a G chord on the ukulele.
Yeah, exactly.
And, when you sent me some of the questions, I was lucky enough to go to the Guitar Town Festival out in Copper Mountain, Colorado, a couple of times. And Peyton and McKenna were there. And McKenna, I think, was about 8 the first time we went out. And they have a question portion of the show in the morning where all the guitarists are there, and they ask them, how do you get started? And probably about half of them start on ukulele. And this is, they're about my age or a little bit older. So that's how you started when you were a kid. You started on ukulele, then you go to a guitar. So, and then to think, when I play the mandolin, I think of it as an upside down guitar, because instead of the E string being up top, the E string's down bottom, E, A, D, G, if you're looking at from bottom to top, where it's E, A, D, G from top to bottom on guitar. So that's kind of how I approached that. And then the bass, I just truly love to play. Like I said, my dad played. So we just, I look at it, that's more of a linear instrument as opposed to a chordal instrument. So I had years of piano lessons. And I will tell you that made it really hard to play the guitar. Because the piano is all horizontal, and you have flat keys at those half steps. So that when I had to go to guitar, which didn't have any black keys, and it went to, and so it was kind of a challenge. But again, you figure out the G scale, you move it down a string, you can now do the C scale if you're in first position. So I just kind of approach it in that sort of way of a pattern. I start with guitar. I start on D and A7, but Will Schmidt and Bob Morris, who wrote Essential Elements. I met Bob Morris. He's the education guy for Fender guitars. Cool little dude. And he likes the one finger C and the one finger G7 to get people started. And so that's their methodology. But I like the D and the A7 because if you're starting off with shapes, you have a triangle, you have a straight line, and that for teaching 8th, 7th, 8th graders, they understand that pretty good. And if you took the D and then you say it's a movable chord, and now you're playing the intro to 8 days a week, by moving the D chord, now kids are going, I'm pretty good. That's cool. So it is. But in the hard part about being in technology now is you don't have a lot of the ability to do that. In teaching in a class setting, to walk around the classroom and to see that the kid is got the D on the wrong fret, it's the right shape, wrong fret, then you move it is something you can do within that 45-minute, 50-minute time frame. A half an hour on FaceTime isn't the same. And so I don't start kids on FaceTime. I won't start a kid new. I'll wait till this is all over and you can come into the studio and we can get a good start. I went from 20 private students down to 6. Just because I have to know that even though there's a time lag, so I'm playing, it sounds like they're playing behind me, but I know they're not because I know where they were when this all started. So I just have that confidence in them. So that makes this time kind of difficult. There are some great people that do lessons online. They videotape them, and then for the unbelievably low price of whatever, you can send in your, I have Apple Pay, I just started doing that. I'll probably get a Square and start doing some of those things too. I do have my own LLC, which is the Chord and Stick Factory. And so that helps them out with the chords on the guitar and sticks for drums. But that helps out, that keeps things going, some income coming. But it's kind of a unique experience right now.
It is. It's really tough because I know I was in this position where I had just graduated from Olivet, and everything was really, really great. I just received, I had just auditioned into grad school. I just had gotten acceptance in at Centrals for classical guitar performance. And I also, all these good things were happening at the same time. And then I was also, I got 2 teaching positions. So I teach an academy in Grand Ledge, Michigan, which is just outskirts of Lansing. And then I got one in Okemos. So I was teaching, and I had about 25 students, which was really, really good for me. And it was just super, super awesome because, I felt like I was like inexperienced or whatever. I was like really, really fresh to this whole thing, like fresh college graduate. And so lucky enough that I got these positions. And then all of a sudden this virus came, and I went from like 25 to 3.
Yeah.
So it's definitely, but I'm doing the Zoom stuff too, and doing lessons over Zoom, and a lot of the kids, they have come to the terms that they kind of transition into that really well, actually, which I was really quite surprised about, because they're also the generation raised on technology. And I'm not trying to date myself. I mean, I just like you mentioned with your kids with getting devices, I didn't get those things either. I mean, I was outside eating dirt, And so, it is interesting because I think you gain a new perspective as a young person when you're not raised on those devices, because you don't need them. So when you're given an instrument and you learn how to play that, and you find that you get enjoyment way more out of that than you would if you were sitting there gaming or whatever, it's really easy to get lost in practicing music for 4 to 6 hours a day, because that's what you get excited to do every day. Especially now with all the extra time that we have.
Right. And I've being a music teacher, and then you go to faculty meetings, and then you try to say something smart, and they go, "Oh, wasn't that really cute? The music guy spoke, and why don't you sing it?" But I think a book that I read about 10 years ago or so, maybe a little bit more, is written by Ian Jukes, who writes for Macworld Magazine and a couple other guys, and it's called Understanding the Digital Generation. And I think it's really important that and I was trying to get across to my staff, it's important that they read this book in their leisure time, whatever, because what Ian says is very true, is that in my generation, I would build a model. I'd go spend $3.25 and I build a model. I get the instructions out, the glue in, and put it down, put it together. If I put part number 71 where part number 17 is, I just wrecked the whole thing. It's gone. There goes my $3.25, back in the 70s. That's a lot of money. So I'd have to throw the whole thing out and kick something and then save up another $3.25 and not make that mistake again, and put part 66 where 99 should have went. And so, but now and this is Ian Jukes saying, now all they have to do is, if it screws up, you just press reset and it starts all over. Right. Well, these people are going to be my heart surgeons someday. I'm 54, I don't want some guy looking for a reset button because he botched my operation, right. So that's the importance of fine arts. I mean, that is to the point where I get up on my soapbox and say, look, the fine arts is what's teaching you to do it right, to try to get it right the first time. Right. If you want the band director to stop repeating himself, do it right. If you're in art class and you have now, totally discombobulated whatever statue you're working on, your pottery, your painting, you don't have another chance to do it again. You have to start over from square one. Industrial arts, I mean, it's all important. That's the important part as a student gets older and able to formalize what they're doing. That's really the importance of why we need to put more into the industrial and fine arts programs, because that's taking that knowledge and putting it in there. Mm-hmm. You look at somebody that's got an art class and they have a horse, but the horse has to be behind the tree. So many people take half the horse and put it on each side of the tree. That's not how a horse works. It should be 1/3 of the horse, the part you don't see because the tree's there, and then another third. So, I mean, it teaches you about perspective and teaches you to put all those things that you're doing into that one program. So that's my soapbox moment, I guess.
Wow. Well, you know what? I think it's all, I think it's very relevant, and I think it's very true. I think, music and arts in that regard is one of those things where it gets cut or it gets taken away. Then you're like, we're missing something. That's just the way that I feel. And I obviously am slightly biased because, I'm a musician and that's what I do. But I think, there has been studies time and time again, and I wrote research papers on it, and I know that you're aware of it too, that when you take away arts, you're taking away brain development and development for people in academia. So, whether that's kids that are in kindergarten all the way up through high school, when you eliminate those programs, you're really almost just doing a disservice to those kids, because they're not developing in the same manner of, kids that are raised in those types of environment. And I've also talked to a lot of friends who've done like study abroad stuff, and unfortunately, I've never had the opportunity to do that. But I'm hoping maybe at Central, if I get the opportunity to do that, I'm going to do it. But when I talk to friends that have gone and study abroad in music over in like the European countries, their music programs are so prevalent from what they have told me, that they are never in question as far as cutting funding, because that's what they're raised with. And you go to school, you have a music education right alongside your mathematics or your whatever language arts class or your science class. And it's just such a unfortunate reality that at least here in the US and the States, that those are one of the first things to be cut from, funding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as my daughter went for 2 weeks over to Europe after she graduated with a music program, Michigan Music Ambassadors, and it was just so cool to see every town has an amphitheater of some sort, and she played in England, and of course they played Stars and Stripes Forever, and here's this little old couple, and they have an American flag waving it back and forth to Stars and Stripes Forever, and just how much they enjoy music. I think the same is prevalent here, but I think we are working our way into a society that has to schedule it way harder than what they used to. I'm close to Grand Rapids. We're blessed to have St. Cecilia. We were supposed to go see Elton John last week, my son and I, for one of his graduation presents, and to have Van Andel and DeVos, and so they're all great places, and they do a great service for the Grand Rapids Symphony, and so it's interesting to see the way they do things. I've had Norwegian exchange students. They have school is school. If you're part of a sport or if you're part of music, that's something totally different. But it never conflicts. We have to schedule things around, a basketball tournament or something else that might happen. Well, that doesn't really happen in Europe a lot of times, because and in this band, you might have kids that are 8 years old all the way to 20 years old, so that's how band works. And so when my first Norwegian daughter got here, she was she was just like, I don't know what this is, because we're a competitive marching band. So we're doing moves like she's never seen. They go in a block, they march a parade, they're good. So it's interesting to see those different ways they do things, and of course we try as musicians, we try to take the best of all these different things to create who we are. Right. So when I'm playing, I might be playing a little bit of in a gypsy jazz style along with one group, and then I might play with a different group, and in the key of G. Everything that I've ever played bluegrass with is in the key of G there. I did do a thing for Martin Guitars a while ago, and they hired a band to come in, and somebody wanted to do their song in the key of A, and Elderly put it on, and the guitarist had to get his cape off, and I'm going, you gotta be kidding me. He was a phenomenal guitarist, but I said, you're gonna get a capo and put a capo too. Okay, all right. You're the guy they hired. All right, so. But it's fun, and you see so many great things, like you said, playing with a lot of different people is awesome, because I learned so much from them. Just like when I was, my high school band director, Robert Stow, is my hero. And he had a way of not getting mad at to make kids want to love music. That's really what he did. He didn't get mad and stomp off the podium and throw the baton. But he just had a way of making kids want to know more, and that's always been my philosophy too, is to kind of trick them sometimes. And where a kid might get a piece of music and say, I can't play that, I said, well, in our warm-ups you just did. You see how that lines up there? Oh yeah. So I guess you can't play it after all. So, but it's kind of different. I've been blessed, in each turn of my career, and there's been a lot. I started off, when I was in school, you had to practice 30 minutes a day for 5 days a week in order to get an A. And I was good at practicing, and I could get done in 10 minutes what it might have taken 30 minutes for somebody else to do. So that never made sense to me. But I started off, when I started teaching, that was the way it was done. So now I have parents, and I still have parents that would say, hey, don't they have to practice like 30 minutes a day? No, they just have to practice till they get it right. You know, once they can work on getting it right, once they get it right, then that's it. But that is kind of always been, and when I went to Olivet, you know, and I went there playing percussion, I tried out for jazz band my freshman year and didn't make it. I was third, and they only needed 2. And so I asked Charles Seitz, the professor, he said, you know, what should I do to get better? And, you know, he handed me Chick Corea's electric band. I listened to Steve Gadd play the drums, totally changed my life and how I looked at taking the basic rhythms and then turning it into a fusion. And so, I mean, so there's, you know, another way. We run into these people all the time. When I started doing guitar at the Guitar Town Festival, we met Jon Jorgenson, and Jon Jorgenson played for 8 years. He played with Elton John. And then last summer he was playing with Elton because the other guitarist had to take a little leave for about 6 months. But he also was the Telecaster, excuse me. And then he also did Desert Rose Band in the 80s, big hair country band. What else? He was a pallbearer at Earl Scruggs' funeral. So the guy's legit, you know, the guy's phenomenal. And when we were there listening to all the guitarists on the dais of how did you start, John, my kids were in front of us, my wife and I, and the chairs in front. And John said, well, I started playing guitar because my sister played guitar and I wanted to do it like her. And Peyton turned around. He said, yeah, just like McKenna and I. Yeah, yep, that's good. Turn around, shut up. And then he goes, but, you know, music was always in my house because my mom taught piano lessons. And I'm looking at my wife going, that's a coincidence right there. You know, there are 2 things. He said, but I had to do something with music because my dad was a band director. And my son totally flew off his chair. He's just like, ah! And it's because that was the same thing. So, you know, after it was all over, we told Jon Jorgenson the story. And to this day, I mean, we are Facebook friends, like real friends. Not like, you know, I'm Facebook friends with Joe Walsh, but he doesn't even know I exist, you know?
Yeah,
but
right.
Jorgenson does. You know, here's the king of gypsy jazz and played with Elton John. And so when it's my birthday or my kid's birthday, he'll say, hey, tell McKenna I said happy birthday. And so it's really cool that this music is, we sometimes think that we'll never be able to meet this person or do this. And it really is. There are, you know, out of all the people I've met, there's probably only 1 or 2 of them that I thought, what a jerk. You know, and most of them are just like happy to be recognized and happy to talk to a human being and not have to sit in the car with, you know, $1,000 worth of equipment and your $500 guitar for a $50 gig, you know? So, yeah.
Wow.
Cool.
That is cool. I mean, to kind of piggyback off that, I always tell like my friends and my family who's not involved in music, I always say the experiences that I have obtained because I do music, I would never have obtained if I decided. And again, I'm not knocking any other career paths. I know that there's a lot of awesome other career opportunities for people, but that just didn't coincide with what I wanted to do. But again, I would have never obtained the experiences doing another career path if it wasn't for doing music. The people that I have met, the places that I have played. One of the biggest gigs that I do can you know, regularly and routinely, which now I'm not as much anymore for obvious reasons, but is playing at a lot of assisted living and nursing homes. I do that a lot, and they're always so responsive. And I always say that those types of gigs are my best audiences. Yeah. Because those men and women that are in there, and even the staff that work there, they're just so overjoyed. Not only because I'm, you know, playing this, you know, classical stuff or whatever, or you're playing Bach or whatever, but then they also look at it and they're just like, you're a young person. Like, I don't know if there's this misconception that people that play old music, or I should say outdated music, is like, it's supposed to have this person who's supposed to be old and gray. I don't know. But, those are always the best experiences, are when I have the little old cute lady that comes up to me and says, I really do hope you come back, because, that was awesome. Or I had one time where I was playing and a guy came up to me and he said, I'll tell you what, he's like, I've been here for quite a while and we've had lots of guitar players, lots of them. And then he's like, but you're the only one that actually knows how to play. And I was like, I fell back. And I was like, whoa. It's like, that's a pretty bold compliment. I said, I really appreciate that. But I said, I still obviously have a lot to learn. But that was but just those types of experiences that I will take to my last day, my last breath, that I would never have obtained again if I wasn't doing this now,
Sure. Well, and in education, you multiply that by millions.
Right.
I've nice part about being retired. People ask me. I would see 200-300 students a day.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm kind of a solitude abuser. I like playing. I've been able to practice and play exponentially, with this time that I have now. And I do miss the students, but when you're working with students, and some of them take that career path,
Mm-hmm.
of keeping on with it. The person who replaced me was one of my students that I had in Belden, so that was phenomenal. Keith Hall, who's a professor at Western Michigan University in jazz percussion and jazz history. I mean, he's one of my students, and he's played with thousands of people. One time he called me up when he was in New York and he said, hey, just guess who sat in with us? And it was Wynton Marsalis, and he played in New York and for the Lion King, he played. So those are the times where you really appreciate what you did. And you look at some of the students that one of my friends teaches in inner city Detroit, and his band, if you listen to it, it sounds horrible. It would relatively get third or fourth divisions at festival. Third was good for them. But every one of those students would go on to college, and they would be accountants and CPAs and lawyer assistants. So success is so much different depending on who you are and where you are and what you're doing. There is no one right way. I've been doing these free clinics on Monday for beginners. You can, at 6:30 on my Facebook page, I do beginner ukulele lesson. And then at 7 o'clock, I do beginner guitar lesson. And then cool. I'll always get people going, well, what guitar is right for me? Mm-hmm. And I said, I don't know. And, I could know this person for years, but there's so much more into it. You need to put your hands on it, and you need to, what might work for one person might not work for another person.
Sure, yeah.
I breed love guitars. I am now starting to do a lot with them. And just before all this hit, I would talk to them, and we would bounce off some ideas of how to set up, guitar classrooms and stuff. So it's different. So, but that's the nice part about when I went to Olivet, when I decided to go to Olivet, they had a Professor Klaczynski who did the orchestra. And the day before, I was at Michigan State, and I nailed my audition, and I had good grades. So it was looking pretty good for Michigan State. And then they asked me, what would I rather do, marching or concert percussion? And I said, well, if I'm a teacher, shouldn't I be doing both? And they said, well, you have to pick one. Mm-hmm. I was kind of bumming, because I didn't know, really what the answer to that question was. And then I went to Olivet, and I told them, I'm kind of concerned, because I also thought about performing. And so Professor Klaczynski said, well, as a teacher, you can always perform. But as a performance degree, you can't go into the school and teach. You have to have that teaching certificate, right. Which was the best advice I had received. And I don't regret, going to a small private college for that first year, or for that to get my bachelor's degree, because it was the perfect setting. I got to do orchestra. I got to do string methods and woodwind methods and play marching band. My senior year, every senior had to write a show. for the marching band. So I mean, it was I think for me, and Olivet gave me the chance to realize that I'm going to have to be flexible, because I don't know what the future is going to hold, whether I'm going to end up in a band like Rockford, or if I'm going to end up in a band in the middle of the UP, with maybe 12 kids in it. So that flexibility was what I really cherished. And then, when I did grad school at Vandercook School of Music in Chicago, that's where I got to refine some of my craft and really become who I am now. So it's a little bit different now, with the way music departments are set up. And having to meet different accreditations and some of those things. So, but I'm always a proponent of small colleges, because I think you get a really good degree, and you get that individual, and you get somebody to say, "Oh, well, you should try this." And so it's kind of cool.
Wow. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think I remember because I started out in Lansing Community College before I transferred into Olivet, and I was looking at all these different schools, and I came across Olivet, and my instructor, who actually taught at LCC, also teaches at Olivet still. And I always thought that going to the community college, you develop these relationships with these faculty, and then you basically have to go to a new college and basically restart all over again. So that was one of the big points and encouragement as far as going to Olivet, and I definitely would never redo that. I'm so happy that I attended Olivet. I feel like I obtained a lot of skills, and I had a lot of opportunities for myself that I actually created, where I encourage these things and say, hey, we have this cafe shop in Olivet. I don't know if you guys have ever had people play in here or not, but like, would you guys be interested? And 90% of the time, yeah, right away. When do you want to play? You want to play today? We'll give you half an hour. We'll make you a spot. And I'm not sure if other places are as accepting of that if you choose other schools, but Olivet, you can create so many opportunities for yourself. And the faculty is more than encouraging for you to do those types of things. Wow. Well, this has been great. I've really, really enjoyed hearing about, your musical journey, and this is just fun. I always gain a lot of perspective about this. I could talk for 2 more hours, but I don't want to do that. But in closing, just one more kind of question here. Do you have, like some last words or any like advice for anybody who's aspiring to do music or to try to step into that career? Maybe they're, wanting to transition. Because my whole goal with teaching in this podcast and all these things is to try to really kind of, as a young person, reach out to other people that want to do this as a career and say, you can do it. It is a possible, and it is a legitimate career, and you're a living example of that. And this is why I'm so glad that you're on here. But what kind of advice or, words of wisdom or guidance would you offer up to those individuals?
I think, I said, going through 30 years, and really every decade, there's been a different change of philosophy of education. And even in music, don't pigeonhole into one thing. I think to be great at something and then be really good at other things, realizing that one might have to raise up as another one goes down. Because music is different. It's still basically the same over hundreds and thousands of years. And we're coming to a point where mathematically, how can there be new music when there's so much music evolving through every year, Right. So whether it is, I don't know what the next thing is, as we're going through this Corona thing is, here in Belding, the high school director does these small little music theory things. The middle school band director makes contact with kids, to make sure they're all right. What happens, if we're still on lockdown in the fall? Do we change grades? Do we do some of those things? So I think if anything, with the recent events, it has taught us, how to be flexible. And that's why I always try to tell my students, when something goes wrong, you have to bend and not break. If you're playing a solo, I had a guitar that was kind of in the style of a Gibson semi-hollow body, but made by Washburn, and it would always get out of tune. And so I went to hit the B flat, and it wasn't a B flat, but and I couldn't figure out why it was a B flat, and I'm supposed to be playing this, and the keyboard player leans over and said, "Are you having a stroke?" I said, "This is supposed to be B flat, and it's not." And he said, "Stop playing that note." So, and then I threw the guitar out the door. But to bend, to make that change. So if you make a mistake, and that's, again, what music is. If you make a mistake, the next time around, fix it, or do it the same way and make people believe that that's the way it's supposed to be played in the first place. Pat Donahue said that when I saw him in Lansing. And so that is, it's really, be open-minded, be happy, you're doing something that I used to tell my students, look, and we were blessed. Over one third of the student body was in band or choir or guitar, and so that doesn't happen in a lot of public schools, but I would tell them, be happy, because you're doing something that other students wish they could do, but can't. Right. And that is to make other people happy too. And I think if you're a teacher and you get them to understand and believe that what they're doing is a mind-altering experience for others to see and be a part of, then you'll always be happy, and that's you just got to be happy at where you're at, whether you look at for another job and or you retire because the time is right, but be happy. That's the big thing.
Wow, that is very, very admirable advice. I have really enjoyed this. I want to personally thank you for being a guest on here. This is awesome. I've gained a lot of a wealth of knowledge, and I wish our paths would have crossed sooner in life, because it seems like studying under you would just be like, wow, man, that's my music teacher. Like, you see him? So anyway, I hope this clears up soon, and I wish everything well for you and your family, and I know you'll be practicing hard. So again thank you for being on the Just Music podcast.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Justin.
All right, everyone, that was the podcast episode. I hope you really liked it. If this is the first time that you've watched one of my podcasts, you should definitely check out the playlist of the Just Music podcast. I've had the opportunity to interview tons of different people, and you should really give that a check out. So I hope you guys are all doing well, and I will see you in the next upcoming episode. Take care.